A listener note, this episode contains some adult language and themes.
Aaron Hernandez arrived at the University of Florida just after his 17th birthday. Soon he had a scooter, and he and other football players were zooming around campus together under the palm trees and live oaks. The big kid from Connecticut stuck out on the Gainesville campus. He sported an LL Bean backpack, which is an iconic New England brand. Here's his former teammate, Ahmad Black.
That's the backpack he had. That's the first thing I seen on walking down on campus, man. It was a backpack he used to always carry. I never saw one before, and I saw Aaron with it, and I thought it said Lil Bean. I'm like, what the heck is a Lil Bean backpack? Like,
But it didn't take long for Hernandez to find trouble. He'd only been a student for 3 months when on April 28, 2007, he went out on a Saturday night with Florida's star quarterback, Tim Tebow. It was a typical weekend at a typical college bar called The Swamp. Overcooked food, warm beer, waitresses in short shorts. Typical until a fight broke out. At 1 a.m., the bar manager called the police. He said he'd been sucker punched in the left ear. What's more, he knew who the attacker was. He told police it was, quote, the freshman tight end. Hernandez, who was all of 17, admitted to police that he clocked the bar manager in the side of the head over a dispute about an unpaid bar tab. At first, the manager wanted to press charges. The punch had ruptured his eardrum. But Hernandez was a football player, and in Florida that meant he had connections. In the middle of the night, he called his coach, Urban Meyer. Almost immediately, Hernandez had a private defense lawyer, a lawyer with a knack for getting Florida athletes out of trouble. Soon, the bar manager had dropped the charges. Hernandez had already learned a big lesson about playing big-time college football. When you're a football player, actions don't always have consequences. From the Boston Globe and Wondery, I'm Bob Hohler, and this is Gladiator, an investigative series about Aaron Hernandez and Football, Inc. This is Episode 3, Gator Nation. To tell you how Aaron Hernandez ended up in Florida and what happened when he got there, here's my Spotlight colleague, Andrew Ryan.
Back in Bristol, Aaron Hernandez was always the best athlete on the field. Now, he was about to join one of the top programs in college football. And there was tremendous pressure to get him to Gainesville as soon as possible. Forget the senior prom. It was time for him to learn a playbook as thick as a dictionary. When Aaron Hernandez threw that punch at the Swamp and ruptured the bar manager's eardrum, he still should have been in high school. I wanted to understand how Hernandez started college in January, 6 months before the rest of his class graduated. So I tracked down Hernandez's high school principal, Dennis Sigmund, who retired to Florida. And I brought with me pictures of Hernandez from the Bristol Central yearbook.
And Aaron, great smile, good-looking young man. And the quote under him, if it is to be, it is up to me.
At the start of his junior year, Hernandez had committed to play football for the University of Connecticut, where his older brother was already the quarterback. But then, in April 2006, he went to visit the University of Florida in Gainesville. There, he got to see up close what a championship college program looked like. It must have made UConn football look like the minor leagues to him. Ted Spiker is a professor at the University of Florida, but he knows a little bit of what Hernandez must have gone through when he first arrived.
You know, I moved from the North, right? So in North, pro sports were king.
But that's not the case in Florida. The university's massive stadium, the Swamp, is larger than the ones used by Florida's NFL teams.
If you look at Florida and you look at especially a number of southern schools, you know, college football tends to be the ruler. It's majestic, it's a pageant, it's a time to connect with your friends and your family.
Each one of us remembers when we felt it the first time, when you looked up and down those bleachers and saw 90,000 saluting alongside you when you first saw a gator.
On a rainy afternoon at the swamp, Hernandez got his first taste of that pageantry that they call Gator Nation. The swamp regularly holds more fans than the entire population of Hernandez's hometown of Bristol. The game Hernandez watched didn't even count. It was a preseason practice game. Still, 45,000 people were there to watch. The visit clearly left a lasting impression, as did Florida's new quarterback, an 18-year-old kid named Tim Tebow. When Hernandez got back to Bristol,
I think at first people were somewhat stunned that he didn't want to go and play with DJ. But when they sat down and thought about it, it was a pretty big deal. And I think pride in who he was and where he was going began to take over. And everyone said, man, he's going to go and play Division I football and has a good shot at getting in the NFL. So we're happy for him, and let's follow him and let's support him.
Aaron Hernandez was going to be a Gator. Big-time college football is like $1 billion business. Coaches make millions. Recruiters zip from high school to high school in private jets and helicopters. At the University of Florida alone, football revenue topped $88 million the most recent year. If college football operates like a business, then Coach Urban Meyer has been one of the game's most successful CEOs. Meyer has 3 national championships and counting. He came to Florida in 2005 as the nation's hottest young coach. Meyer brought with him an intensity, a drive to win that pushed Gator football to new heights.
And remain alive in their quest for a berth in the championship game in Atlanta.
Gainesville Sun columnist Pat Dooley remembers walking under the tunnel at the Gator Bowl after Florida had just beaten Georgia.
He turned to his sports information guy, Steve McClain, and said, "What's my record now?" He was just so focused on winning.
A big part of his winning strategy was crisscrossing the country recruiting high school players. And he also did something unusual, as Bristol Central's principal, Dennis Sigmund, remembers.
It was during a visit to the school by Urban, just Urban and I in my office.
Meyer told the principal that he wanted Hernandez to leave high school 6 months early. In all his years, Sigmund had never heard of such a thing.
It was the first time that I had heard that they were doing this at the college level. He was the one that said, we need to get him down here in the for spring ball. And I said, well, how are we doing that? You know, and he said, well, he has to graduate. And I said, well, I don't know if we can do that. I guess the idea is you want your key players to know the offense in spring so that you can work on it in summer rather than come in the summertime and be behind. And so you get a jump on the coming season.
That's why Meyer wanted Hernandez in Florida as soon as possible, so his newest recruit could start training, start learning the playbook. But the principal hesitated.
17-year-old kid, young, you know, even though he looks mature, big man.
Sigmund knew Hernandez was physically and athletically capable of competing against men, but in other ways, he was still a boy. Since his father's death, his mother's new boyfriend had moved in, and Hernandez had essentially moved out, staying over many nights at his cousin's house instead of coming home. Sigmund worried about what to do.
In hindsight, I would have probably said, no way can I do this. For me, as principal, that was a big concern.
Sigmund says Meyer and the other Florida coaches were insistent, including an assistant coach there, Steve Adagio, who once coached at a nearby Connecticut high school.
They were pushing pretty hard. I think, you know, every kid wants to hear that you can play in the NFL or you can play in the NBA, you know. To push that on a 17-year-old, he said, yeah, I want to do this. Yeah, I want to do it. And so to hear that, not just from Urban, but from a local guy, Steve Adagio, who was Urban's assistant and had come out of Cheshire High School, and knowing who he was and so on, it was pretty daunting on Aaron.
Hernandez wanted to go. His mother cried at first, but coaches Meyer and Adagio visited her at home in Bristol to talk to her. Ultimately, the decision fell to Sigmund as principal. Hernandez had taken a summer school class and had enough credits. Sigmund said okay. He would allow him to graduate early.
I mean, if I had it to do over again, I would have fought tooth and nail not to let that kid graduate at mid-year, not to let him go to Florida at mid-year. But again, it's hindsight. It's all hindsight. We never got to see the full growth of Aaron Hernandez at high school, you know, and would that have changed anything?
Aaron Hernandez left high school 6 months early and moved 1,200 miles south. He arrived on Florida's campus in January 2007. At that time of year, it's typically balmy, and there was something else in the air, too. Florida's basketball team had just won a national championship and was primed for another. On Hernandez's first day of classes, Florida's football team won a national championship.
For the second time in 100 years of football at the University of Florida, the Gators celebrate as national champions.
Students flooded the streets, climbing light poles and chanting. I called up his former teammate, Ahmad Black.
I think the first time we met was we did the Sports Illustrated photo shoot. They had just won the championship, and Urban was like holding up the trophy, and it was all the guys that came early, a lot of the student body like in the background. Sports Illustrated came and did a picture and did like a story about that.
That Sports Illustrated photo shows Urban Meyer holding the national championship trophy. And right there next to him is Hernandez, mimicking a Gator chomp with his elbows touching, hands spread wide like an open jaw. Alongside him are 8 top recruits who graduated high school early to come to Gainesville, including Ahmad Black, Cam Newton, Marquise, and Mike Pouncey. Hernandez may have graduated high school early, but he wasn't ready for college. An admissions official noted that he needed special help with reading and writing. Hernandez had to immediately take remedial classes, not for credit, at a local community college. Lots of Meyer's early enrollees at Florida took classes for a semester at that same community college. At Florida, he did get some good marks, but some of his courses were bowling, theater appreciation, and a course called Plants, Gardening, and You. Because really, Hernandez and the others weren't in Florida to learn. Playing football was their job, with a 40 to 60-hour work week. Of those 8 top recruits who graduated high school early in Hernandez's year, only 2 would earn degrees from the University of Florida. Because degrees aren't the point. The number that matters is that 6 of them would go on to play in the NFL.
You know you need to hire someone, but you're putting it off because it seems like a big, difficult task. The work is piling up, and now it feels like you'll never have time to comb through a bunch of resumes to find the right person for the job. That doesn't seem smart. But you know what is smart? Going to ZipRecruiter.com/Gladiator to find your next great hire instead. Unlike other job sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't wait for candidates to find you. ZipRecruiter finds them for you. Its powerful matching technology scans thousands of resumes, identifies people with the right skills, education, and experience for your job, and actively invites them to apply. So you get qualified candidates fast. No more sorting through the wrong resumes, no more waiting for the right candidates to apply. It's no wonder that ZipRecruiter is rated #1 by employers in the U.S. By the way, that #1 rating comes from hiring sites on Trustpilot with over 1,000 reviews. Right now, as a listener of this show, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/Gladiator. That's ZipRecruiter.com/GLADIATOR. ZipRecruiter.com/Gladiator. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
The Gator players dominated on the football field, but they often made headlines off it. The Orlando Sentinel kept a running count of players arrested under coach Urban Meyer. The tally hit 31. Some charges could be chalked up to college antics, like a case in which a player threw a paper cup at a Jimmy John's employee. But plenty were more serious. A player fired an AK-47 in a parking lot. Another faced a felony burglary charge for stealing a laptop. Police found a third player passed out drunk behind the wheel at a stoplight. Aaron Hernandez never actually made that list of players arrested, even when he'd ruptured a bar manager's eardrum. Because like many Florida players, a local lawyer helped him avoid the charges. His name was Huntley Johnson. Johnson helped lots of Gators get out of trouble. An ESPN investigation found that Florida football players avoided criminal charges more often than the general public. Gainesville police even joked that Huntley Johnson had a better notification system than 911. College houses with palm trees and Spanish moss. 226. I went to talk to Huntley Johnson. His office in Gainesville is cluttered with sports memorabilia. Framed newspaper articles boast of Johnson's legal specialty. One headline reads, "His mission, save Gators' hides." An autograph poster has the inscription, "Huntley, thanks for being a part of the team." It's signed, Urban Meyer. But when I asked about Aaron Hernandez, Johnson didn't have much to say. All right, so you were going to tell me about Aaron Hernandez.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you about him briefly. I really liked him. He's always extremely courteous to me. And it was a pleasure to represent him.
Okay, was anything else you can say about him? Or
I could say a lot more, but I'm not going to say another word.
ask you why you don't want to say more?
That's because I represented him and the young man is deceased, and I respect that. Okay. I have nothing to add.
Thank you.
We're done.
That bar fight at the Swamp wasn't the last time trouble would find Hernandez. And the next time would be much more serious.
There's the snap.
It was the night of the game against Auburn on September 29th.
To be good.
The Gators lost.
They have stunned the Florida Gators and snapped the Gators' 18-game winning streak.
After the game, Hernandez walked into a downtown club. The crowd included Gators, current and former football players. Hernandez was still only 17, but football players were VIPs. His Gator teammate, Mike Pouncey, said a guy in the club snatched a gold chain off his neck and then taunted him. Later, some of those football players would say it was tough to see exactly what happened next because the dance floor was so crowded. When the club closed, the crowd spilled outside. Hernandez was angry. After a brief standoff in the parking lot, everyone drove away. What happened next has never been clear. There was a shooting, and the aftermath would underscore how the football program protects its own.
I was at home asleep.
That's Gainesville detective Patty Nixon. The first calls about a shooting came into the police at 2:24 a.m., just minutes after Hernandez and his friends had left the parking lot.
I received a phone call from my sergeant asking me to respond to an attempted homicide. There were 2 people shot. One person was shot in the arm. The other person was shot in the head. We were told that he probably was not going to make it.
Detective Nixon started to piece together what had happened at the club before the shooting.
Stay over here. We don't want any trouble.
No, I was telling Aaron to stay over there. We don't need no commotion. Anything.
There was an NFL player there that night, Reggie Nelson, who right away told police that he had confronted the guy who snatched the chain and that he had broken up the fight in the parking lot. The guy who'd snatched the chain left, got in the back seat of a Crown Victoria, and drove off. Inside the Crown Vic were 2 other men. The car pulled up to a stoplight, and a gunman came up on foot and fired into the car. The guy in the back seat, the chain snatcher, wasn't hit, but the 2 other men were. The chain snatcher believed the shooting was retaliation by Florida football players because of the fight outside the club. He told them he'd seen a tall Hawaiian or Hispanic man, 6'3", 240 pounds. According to him, the Hawaiian or Hispanic man was the gunman. Detective Nixon wanted to talk to the football players. She reached out to Coach Meyer's personal assistant, John Clark.
I told him that we needed to speak to the Pouncey twins, and also there was a Hispanic male hanging out with them that I wasn't sure who it was, and he told me that it was probably Aaron Hernandez.
The chain snatcher picked Aaron Hernandez out of a 6-person photo lineup. Detective Nixon kept pushing for the football coaches to produce the players, but the minutes were ticking by.
I'll be honest, I was annoyed at the time it took and how many calls I needed to make, but I mean, can't even fathom why it would take that long, but, you know, I just thought that would, you know, hurry the situation because they're aware that, you know, somebody was hanging on by a thread on their life, and it's pretty important.
Nixon thought they might be stalling.
It looks like I spoke to Mr. Clark directly about 6:30 in the morning. It looked like they probably showed up right around 10 o'clock.
Almost 4 hours. The reason for the delay? Detective Nixon says Hernandez and the others were consulting with the Gators' unofficial lawyer, Huntley Johnson. 3 of the players, Reggie Nelson and the 2 Pouncey twins, spoke to police and denied any knowledge of the shooting. But when Nixon came to interview Hernandez,
Aaron was sitting at the desk, and I believe he had his head down, if I recall correctly, when we walked in, had his head down, sleeping. When you're in a police station in the middle of an attempted homicide investigation, you kind of don't expect to walk in on somebody sleeping.
Hernandez asked for a lawyer and refused to answer any questions. Florida has defended its handling of the shooting. Huntley Johnson says he doesn't remember advising Hernandez or the Pouncey twins that night. But records show Johnson did represent them in other cases, some before, some after the shooting. Detective Nixon wasn't the only one who was woken up that night. So was Sandra Hines.
At 4 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call.
Hines is Cory Smith's mom. It was Smith who'd been shot in the head that night.
The young man that called me, he says, "You need to get to the hospital." I said, "For what?" He said, "Cory's been shot." And I asked, "Is he dead?" And he said, I don't know. All I know is they took him.
She rushed to the hospital.
So when I got there, they had done one surgery, I guess, to save his life. But he died on the table 3 times. When I saw him, his head was yay big. It was big. They had him wrapped up. They had all kind of machines on, all kind of machines. And when I got the chance to talk to the doctor, he told me, he said, "I'm gonna have to go back in and do some more work where I had to wait."
Her son fought for his life. The witness who had originally identified Hernandez as the gunman walked back his earlier statement. He admitted he hadn't seen who pulled the trigger, but assumed it was Hernandez because of the argument outside the club. Lots of other witnesses described the gunman as looking nothing like Hernandez. No one has ever been charged with the crime. But Sandra Hines blames the coaches at the University of Florida for protecting the players above getting to the truth about who shot her son.
The school was built on that football team. Gator this, Gator that, chomp, chomp, and all this. And I love football, but I just couldn't watch them. I couldn't watch Myers be on that field with these kids. It was bad, whether they were a shooter or not. If my son had been in one of them, I would have took him to the police station. Turn yourself in. If you got any, tell them what they need to know. This is somebody's life you're still playing with.
Cory Smith survived the shooting, but he had to learn to walk and talk again.
This is a big university, known for football. What they mean when they say Gator country, if you mess with them Gators, it's not going to be good for you.
6 days after the shooting, Cory Smith was still in the hospital.
Head coach Urban Meyer
But Aaron Hernandez and his teammates were back on the field. The Gators had a huge game on national TV against LSU.
LSU in home whites, Gators in road blue. Florida, LSU underway on a sky kick.
In the games that followed, Hernandez started to take off. In one game, Hernandez caught a shovel pass from Tebow and gained 29 yards. At a press conference, Urban Meyer told reporters, Aaron Hernandez, get used to that name. In his sophomore year, he got a big break. The tight end ahead of him got hurt. Hernandez was now the man going into the new season. But then, in that season's opener, Urban Meyer mysteriously benched him. It was the first game of the year against Hawaii.
And it's 56-10 for the Gators, the fifth-ranked team, off to a good start.
Somehow it came up that Aaron Hernandez wouldn't play in the game, and we asked Urban about it. He said he didn't get himself prepared to play the game. And we went, well, what does that mean?
Reporters like the Gainesville Sun's Pat Dooley knew what he really meant.
We just knew that there was some code for something. And we all kind of figured it out, that it was a failed drug test.
Football players like Hernandez were supposed to be tested regularly. They have to pee in a cup and send it off for testing for banned substances. And knowing what we now know, one failed drug test was not surprising. What is surprising is that Hernandez did not fail more tests. Hernandez would later tell his lawyer that he was high every time he took the field in Florida. If he had been tested and had failed twice, Hernandez would have missed half the season. And had he failed 3 times, he would have been done for the year.
You know, he didn't do much last week in their opener, but you could tell the coaches wanted to get him the football.
But as it went, Hernandez was back the next game against Miami.
Tebow all alone on second down and a foot. And there's the snap. Tebow dropping back under pressure, looks to throw the ball down toward the end zone. He's got the tight end quarantined. Aaron Hernandez, touchdown! Aaron Hernandez got behind him, got open, and got 6.
Hernandez kept rolling. Touchdown against Tennessee, 52 yards against Ole Miss. ESPN, headquartered in Hernandez's hometown, loved the local connection.
And where is Hernandez from, that young man? The worldwide leaders in his neighborhood. That's right. You're looking at a tight end from Bristol, Connecticut. Gators strike first.
They won the conference championship, then on to the national championship.
No backs for Tebow, who looks to throw quickly and fires for Hernandez, who makes a man miss at the 36, to the 40. Aaron Hernandez, the 50, into Miami territory, and still pounding hard, pushing inside the 40, and finally they slow him up and push him out of bounds at the 35-yard line.
You don't see a tight end do what Aaron Hernandez did that time very often.
And the next year, he had a monster season. 6 catches at LSU, 120 yards against Vanderbilt. In what would be his final home game as a Gator.
There's the snap to Tebow. Here they come. He throws the ball over the middle. Got a little screen going in the middle, and there's Hernandez with a catch and makes a move at the 25, gets inside the 20, cut back at the 15, still on his feet. He'll waltz into the end zone. Oh, my! Aaron Hernandez fires the ball into the upper deck after a 37.
Reporter Pat Dooley remembers what happened next.
When he does it, my first thought was, what are you doing? What are you thinking?
And I think before that ball was caught in the stands, there were 3 or 4 penalty flags on the grass.
You cost your team 15 yards right there. That's just a selfish act. And then I thought to myself, oh, he's going pro, and that's going to be his last, big statement. I'm letting it all loose right here, and then I'm out of here. And I don't think there was any doubt about that.
Florida fell just short of another championship that year, but Hernandez won the Mackey Award, the award that goes to the best tight end in the nation. Yet even with all that success, Hernandez's lawyer later wrote that Meyer was getting frustrated with his star tight end's behavior off the field, skipping classes, smoking pot. He says Meyer even wanted to throw him off the team, but Tebow convinced him not to. Instead, Meyer bluntly told Hernandez after his junior season, "You're going to have to turn pro." Hernandez's high school principal, Dennis Sigmund, the one who'd given him permission to enroll early in Florida, watched with unease as Hernandez announced he was headed to the NFL draft.
Had we kept him and made him finish high school, maybe he would have seen the value in finishing high school that would have transferred to finishing college. Maybe.
Hernandez had left high school early for college, and now college early for the NFL, all in the space of 3 years. Hernandez left Florida in 2010 for the pros, Urban Meyer now coaches at another big program, Ohio State. I spoke with Meyer about everything from Aaron Hernandez's crimes to Huntley Johnson's involvement to the recruiting of high school students. He didn't want the recording of the interview included in this podcast. Meyer told me he doesn't recall meeting with Hernandez's high school principal, and he told me he didn't pressure high school players to graduate early. He said he did ask for Hernandez to get some counseling. Toward the end of our conversation, I asked him a question. If he could rewind the clock with Hernandez, would he have done anything differently? There was a more than 20-second pause. Then Meyer said, "I really don't know. I saw a distressed person when he came to our place. We tried to surround him with really, really quality people, and we monitored him very closely, and then he went on to an NFL career. So I'm trying to think. We want to see our guys be successful and help them. That's the approach we've always taken. That's a tough question."
Hernandez's ability to explode off the line.
Aaron Hernandez's NFL draft profile was impressive.
He can burst out of cuts and get upfield in a hurry, leaving linebackers in his wake.
But word had gotten out about Hernandez's failed drug test and other bad behavior, according to sports reporter Greg Bedard.
I think 4 or 5 teams told me we had a lot of concerns about gang ties, problems at Florida, things like that.
The same conundrum arose again for Hernandez. Sure, he was physically prepared to take the next step in his football career, but was he emotionally ready? NFL scouts prepared a psychological profile ahead of the draft. In the category of social maturity, he received the lowest possible score. His agent, Brian Murphy, says Hernandez heard about the NFL team's concerns.
It was very important for Aaron, for all the teams to know that, they could count on him, they could rely upon him not to fail a drug test. And so he wanted to send a letter to every NFL team saying, listen, if I'm suspended or whatnot for drugs, I'll pay you back your money.
Test me all you want during my rookie year, Hernandez wrote in that letter. All of the results will be negative, while I'm having an overwhelmingly positive impact on the field. It doesn't seem like it was enough to convince a lot of them.
With the 21st pick in the 2010 NFL Draft, the Cincinnati Bengals select Jermaine Gresham, tight end, Oklahoma.
Hernandez was passed over in the first round.
With the 42nd pick in the 2010 NFL Draft, the New England Patriots select Rob Gronkowski, tight end, Arizona.
And the second, Hernandez may have been an All-American. He may have won the award as the best college tight end in the nation. Still, 5 tight ends were selected before him. But there was one team that had a reputation for taking chances on players no one else wanted. The team's head coach spent time watching the Gators up close.
I remember when I was covering the Gators, Belichick would come down to Gainesville and sit in on practices.
Coach Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. Here's Ben Volen, Boston Globe.
Urban would pick Belichick's brain, and Belichick would pick Urban Meyer's brain about things that are going on in college.
In fact, soon after a Tebow to Hernandez catch in the 2009 National Championship game, the TV cameras had drifted up to a luxury box.
Certainly interested spectators here tonight. Robert Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots, and of course alongside Bill Belichick. The first time Belichick's been able to hang out the first week of January and not work for a long time.
I'm surprised he's smiling.
So finally, in the 4th round, with the 113th pick of the 2010 draft, the Patriots selected Aaron Hernandez. He was going to play in Foxborough, Massachusetts, just a 2-hour drive from Bristol. He was going to New England. He was going home, which wasn't necessarily good news.
I think the worst thing to happen to Aaron Hernandez was that the Patriots drafted him. I think that this story turns out a lot differently if he's, say, in Seattle or San Francisco or someplace just out of reach of Bristol, Connecticut.
That's on the next episode of Gladiator.
From the Boston Globe and Wondery, this is part 3 of 6 of Gladiator, an investigative series from the Spotlight team about who could have made a difference in the life of one young man. If you'd like to help us spread the word, please give us a review and tell your friends to subscribe. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, NPR One, and every major listening app, as well as Wondery.com. If you're listening on a smartphone, tap or swipe over the cover art of this podcast. You'll find the episode notes, including some details you may have missed. You'll also find some offers from our sponsors. Please support our show by supporting them, and thank you. We'd also like to learn about you. Please complete a short survey at Wondery.com/survey. That's Wondery.com/survey. You'll have an opportunity to tell us what you like about this series. Gladiator was written, reported, and hosted by me, Bob Hohler, and by Beth Healy, Sasha Pfeiffer, Andrew Ryan, and our Spotlight editor, Patricia Wen. We'd also like to give special thanks to Globe editors Brian McGrory, Scott Allen, Mark Morrow, and Janice Page, Spotlight's data specialist Todd Wallach, and reporter Maria Kramer. Gladiator was produced by Amy Padula, sound design by Jeff Schmidt, executive produced by George Lavender, Marshall Louis, and Hernan Lopez for Wondery.